The engine hummed beneath him like a living creature. Warm, steady, powerful, familiar. Lieutenant Arthur Hale, United States Army Air Forces, sat in the cockpit of his P-38 Lightning, sunlight glinting across the canopy as he soared above the Pacific Ocean's endless blue. He was 24 years old. He had flown more than 40 missions. He had tasted death more than once, but today felt ordinary. The air was still. The sky was clear. The radio chatter was light. Some of the men even joked as they flew in formation. Arthur's best friend, Tom Davenport, spoke through the radio. "After this, I'm getting eggs and coffee. Real coffee, not the ration muck." Arthur laughed, a short, warm sound. "You think they serve real coffee in New Guinea?" He replied. The Pacific had its beauty, but also its truth. Green, endless jungle. Humidity so thick it turned breath into sweat. Insects that sounded like saw blades. Heat that made the world shimmer. Below, the jungle rolled like a living sea. The tranquility shattered in seconds. A flash of silver. A sharp scream from the radio. Then another. Japanese Zero fighters burst from the cloud bank. Swift, agile, deadly. Arthur snapped into instinct. Throttle forward. Wings banking. Sun behind him. Altitude bleeding fast. The cockpit shook as rounds ripped past him, glass vibrating, metal rattling, engine whining in rising panic. Tom's voice turned frantic. "Arthur, on your tail!" Arthur jerked the stick, too late. A burst of fire tore through the right engine. The plane lurched violently, smoke blooming like black wings, warning alarms screeched. Fuel pressure dropped. Temperature spiked. The Pacific sky became a blur of spinning horizon and clouds. Arthur's breath turned short and sharp. He was going down. The jungle rose up to meet him, a roof of green, thick and unforgiving. He braced. He pulled the eject release, but the mechanism jammed. No time. He crossed his arms over his chest. A pilot's last prayer. Impact. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. The world tore itself apart. And then, silence. A deep, swallowing silence. Arthur opened his eyes slowly. The air was thick like soup. His head rang. Blood trickled down his temple. His left leg throbbed with pain, maybe fractured, maybe sprained. The wreckage of the P-38 was twisted around him, half swallowed by vines and leaves. The jungle was alive with noise. Insects buzzing like electrical wires, birds shrieking overhead, unseen creatures shifting in the undergrowth. He tried standing. The world tilted. He leaned against a broken wing for balance. One fact settled into his mind like a cold stone. No one saw him land. No one knew where he was. He was not behind friendly lines. He was not near a base. He was not even near a village. He was alone in one of the densest, most unforgiving jungles on Earth. And the war above him didn't even know he was missing. In war, men fear bullets, bombs, and fire. But Arthur was about to learn. There is something older than war. Something that does not care about flags or uniforms or nations. The jungle. A world where everything grows. And everything is always hungry. He whispered to himself. Not a prayer, but a promise. I'm going to live. Not because he had orders. Not because he had hope. But because the human will, when pushed to its edge, reveals its sharpest blade. And he had not reached the edge yet. The first thing he felt was the heat. Not the warmth of sunlight, but a heavy, living heat. The kind that pressed into the lungs and made breathing feel like swallowing water. The jungle air wrapped itself around Arthur Hale like a second skin. Damp, sticky, relentless. He wiped sweat from his forehead. It didn't matter. More replaced it instantly. The jungle didn't care who he was. Lieutenant, pilot, soldier, American. None of that mattered here. Here, he was just another animal. At first, the forest sounded quiet, but as his ears adjusted, he realized there was no silence at all. There were voices everywhere. The clicking hum of insects. The chorus of birds that didn't sound like any birds he had ever heard. Something large moving slowly in brush behind him. The distant rush of water. Faint, but real. These were sounds of life. Life watching him. Life assessing him. Life waiting. Arthur leaned against a thick tree trunk and took a slow breath. The air smelled of wet earth, rotting leaves, and something sweet. Some unseen flower blooming for no one. His leg ached sharply when he tried to walk. He could move, but every step felt like fire traveling up his bone. Fine, he could walk. That meant he could survive. The crash site was scattered over a 50-yard radius. Wing fragments caught in branches, twisted metal glinting under ferns. The cockpit glass shattered like ice. He searched with hands, eyes, instinct. He found what he needed. A partially crushed canteen, a survival knife still strapped to the emergency kit, a package of hardtack biscuits, a small flare gun with 2 shots, a faded photograph of Tom and him smiling under the wing of their plane. He stared at that photograph for a long time. Tom was probably still flying, still fighting, still alive. Arthur wasn't sure what hurt more. The thought of being forgotten or the thought of being remembered too late. He slid the photo carefully into his breast pocket. The jungle didn't kill quickly. It killed patiently. A man could survive 3 weeks without food. But water? A few days. Less in this heat. Arthur listened again. There. The faint rush of water. A stream. He followed the sound, moving slowly, pushing vines aside with the knife, careful not to twist his injured leg. Roots rose out of the ground like sleeping snakes. The air grew heavier the deeper he went. His uniform stuck to his skin. His breath came ragged. His muscles trembled. But the sound of running water grew stronger. Then, the jungle opened just enough to reveal a thin ribbon of river cutting through a wall of green. Arthur knelt. He cupped water in both hands, then he stopped. Training whispered in his memory. Running water is safer than still water, but nothing is safe without boiling. He exhaled. No fire, no pan, no matches. He could drink and take the risk, or he could dehydrate and die slowly. He chose life. The water was cold and clear and tasted like stone. It felt like heaven sliding down his dry throat. He drank until his stomach hurt. The jungle closed fast when the sun dropped, like a door slamming shut. One moment the leaves were emerald green. The next, they were black shadows layered over deeper black. Night in the jungle is not the same as night anywhere else. There is no horizon, no open space, no sky. The canopy strangles the light. The darkness feels thick enough to touch. Arthur found a hollow at the base of a tree, shielded from open foliage. He sat with his back against the trunk, knife in hand. The sounds changed. Day voices fell silent. Night voices woke. Cicadas screamed like rotating engines. Something hooted low and mournful. Something else clicked rhythmically, like a clock counting down. And then, rustling. Close. Too close. Arthur held his breath. The rustling moved along the ground. Slow, deliberate. He tightened his grip on the knife. Then he saw them. 2 yellow eyes reflecting faint moonlight through the vines. Not human, not friendly. Watching him. He didn't move. The eyes blinked, then faded back into the dark. Maybe it was a small jungle cat. Maybe a python. Maybe a monitor lizard. It didn't matter. The message was clear. You are being observed. This was not his world. He was trespassing. Arthur had known fear before. Fear in the sky. When the guns fired, when the altimeter dropped, when the engine sputtered, when the radio crackled with someone's last words. But this was different. There was no cockpit now. No squadron. No formation. Just him. Just his breath. His heartbeat. His exhaustion. His pain. And a jungle older than war, older than nations, older than humanity itself. Watching him. Waiting for him to make a mistake. He didn't sleep that night. He watched the darkness. The darkness watched back. When sunlight finally broke through, it didn't feel like hope. It felt like a mercy he hadn't earned. He stood, slow, unsteady. His leg burned. His lips were cracked. His body felt heavier than the world, but he moved because stopping meant dying. Arthur whispered again, "I'm going to live." The jungle didn't answer, but it didn't stop him. Not yet. By the third day, Arthur Hale no longer smelled like smoke, aviation fuel, or metal. He smelled like the jungle: sweat, mud, blood, rotting leaves, fear. There was no escaping the scent of this place. It clung to him, sank into his clothes, seeped into his skin. The jungle wasn't just around him now, it was on him. His stomach growled so hard his ribs shook. The biscuits he'd found were gone, just crumbs dusting the bottom of his pocket. His hands trembled. He scanned the trees, the bushes, the floor, leaves, vines, flowers, roots. None of it felt like food. A cluster of bright red berries dangled from a branch nearby. They looked edible. They looked inviting. He reached out, then stopped. Something from survival training whispered back through memory. In the jungle, the more beautiful a plant looks, the more likely it wants to kill you. Red is a warning. Bright colors signal poison. He lowered his hand. His body screamed with hunger. He ignored it. For now. He returned to the stream, stomach aching, head spinning. He drank again, slowly this time, and that's when he noticed something new. His reflection looked wrong. His eyes were sunken. His skin was pale except where it burned raw red. His lips cracked, bleeding. His hair slicked back with sweat. He looked like someone halfway gone. He splashed water onto his face and froze. Something tiny moved on his neck, a small black shape, a leech attached, feeding. He ripped it off, pain flaring as blood followed. Then another, and another. He checked his legs, his arms, his back, his collar. They were everywhere, small, squirming, silent. He tore them off in handfuls until his skin burned and bled. His breath shook. His heartbeat pounded. He wasn't afraid of blood. He was afraid of disappearing piece by piece. The sky cracked open suddenly. The jungle didn't prepare him. It never did. Rain hammered the world in sheets. It washed his blood away. It soaked his clothes until they clung to him like freezing glue. It dripped into his boots and squelched between his toes. The downpour drowned the world. He lifted his head. Cold water ran over his face. For one moment, he felt almost peaceful, but the rain made the jungle louder and more alive. By night, his body turned against him. Chills racked him. Then heat. Then chills again. He curled against the base of a tree, teeth chattering uncontrollably. He didn't know if it was infection, dehydration, exhaustion, or all of them working together. The jungle doesn't care why. It only cares if. His breath came uneven. His thoughts blurred. Faces appeared behind his eyelids, Tom laughing in the cockpit before takeoff. His mother standing in the yard back in Ohio. "A girl he once danced with 3 summers ago," he whispered. Her name. But he couldn't remember her face anymore. The fever muddied everything. He saw shadows twist among the trees, shapes that looked human but moved wrong. Voices whispered his name. He knew they weren't real. But when you are alone, sick, starving, scared, even shadows feel like company. At dawn, he woke to a rustling above. A large bird, dark feathers, sharp wings, perched on a broken tree limb. An eagle, or something like it. It looked at him, not with curiosity, with calculation, as if deciding if he was already dead. Arthur stared back. He was not prey. Not yet. He forced himself to stand. He forced himself to take one step, then another. The eagle did not move. It just turned its head, slightly, as if acknowledging him, as if saying, Survive, if you can. Something shifted in Arthur that morning. The jungle was no longer a wall. It was a map, not friendly, not safe, but readable. He stopped fearing every sound. He began listening to them. He stopped stumbling blindly. He began moving with the branches, not through them. He stopped thinking like a pilot. He began thinking like a creature that wants to stay alive. This was not courage. This was adaptation. This was instinct sharpening itself like a blade. This was survival, beginning to take hold. As he followed the river deeper into the green maze, Arthur understood something that changed everything. No one was coming for him. Not today. Not tomorrow. Maybe not ever. His survival was no longer a rescue story. It was a war story with one soldier on the battlefield. Just him, against the oldest opponent on earth. He whispered again, not as a promise this time, but as a vow. I'm not dying here. The jungle listened, but it did not answer, because the jungle was not finished testing him yet. By the fourth day, Arthur's senses had sharpened. Not because he wanted them to, but because everything around him demanded it. Out here, not paying attention meant dying. He moved differently now. Lower to the ground. Quieter with each step. One eye always watching the canopy, one ear tracking the forest floor. The jungle hadn't grown safer. He had just grown more aware of its intentions. Near the riverbank, in wet mud, he found prints. Not human. Animal, hooved, two-toed. Deep impressions, maybe a deer, maybe a wild boar. Food. Real food. His stomach tightened. But where there were prey animals, there were predators. He turned to scan the tree line. Nothing moved, but he could feel eyes on him. He wasn't alone. And now the jungle knew he was hungry. The fever had broken during the night. Sweat had soaked his clothes and dried to a stiff salt crust. He needed shelter, something above ground, off the dirt, away from insects. He searched for a tree with a wide forked trunk, something stable enough to support weight. He found one, tall and old, roots winding like veins grabbing the earth. Using vines as rope, he began to tie branches into a crude platform. His hands bled, his arms shook, but the structure held. A bed in the trees. A home, however primitive. Not safe. Nothing in the jungle was safe. But safer. He climbed onto it, testing weight, adjusting his center of balance. For the first time since the crash, he exhaled without panic. Not relief, just space. Life, when stripped to its core, shrinks to simple things. Water, shelter, food, fire, sleep, breathing. Everything else is noise. Food came next. He couldn't outrun anything. He couldn't fight anything big. He had one knife, no bullets. So he built a snare. He remembered training, not from the Air Corps, but from a hunting trip with his father when he was 13. His father's voice returned, quiet and steady. You don't need to be faster than the animal. You just need to think before it does. He bent a thin branch, tied a looped vine, anchored it to a root. A simple snare. He baited it with pieces of a plant root he found that didn't taste poisonous. Then he waited and waited and waited. He didn't know how long. The jungle doesn't tell time. But eventually, a rustle. A small rust-brown creature like a jungle hare hopped into the clearing. It sniffed the root. It stepped forward. The vine snapped. The snare tightened. The animal thrashed. Arthur lunged. Knife in hand. One fast motion. Silence returned. He sat back, hands shaking, chest heavy, heart pounding too loud. He whispered, "Thank you." The jungle didn't answer, but it allowed this victory. He couldn't cook it. No flame. A fire would send smoke into the sky, and smoke meant attention. Japanese patrols were real. Guerrilla fighters were real. Even tribes were unpredictable territory, so he cleaned the meat with the river water and the knife. He ate it raw. It was cold, chewy, metallic with blood. Primitive, but it was food. His body surged with life. For the first time he felt strength return to his limbs. Not much, just enough. Enough was everything. Just before dusk, as he perched in his tree shelter, he heard a sound that did not belong to the jungle. A sound that did not crawl or buzz or crackle. Sound that carried purpose. Voices. Human voices, speaking hurriedly. Speaking in a language he recognized instantly. Not English. Japanese. Arthur froze. Every muscle locked. Breath shallow. The voices moved along the riverbank. Below, boots splashed in shallow water. Metal clinked. One voice laughed. A short, sharp bark. Torches flickered between branches. Faint yellow glows moving through the green dusk. A patrol, heading deeper inland, looking for something. Arthur didn't move, didn't breathe. He realized something then. He had not crashed in the jungle. He had crashed behind enemy lines. The jungle wasn't the only predator. Here, the war was still happening. It hadn't forgotten him. It had simply been waiting. He could follow the patrol. They would lead. Somewhere, a camp, a trail, a road, a map back to the world. Or they would kill him. He watched the torches fade into the distance. He rested his head back against the bark of the tree. He closed his eyes. He whispered, not to himself, but to the jungle, to the war, to fate. Not yet. Not until he was stronger, smarter, silent enough to walk like the shadows themselves. He would not die as prey. He would survive, even if he had to become something else entirely. Arthur woke before dawn, not because he meant to, but because the jungle never truly slept. The world was deep gray, the hour where night lingers and morning hasn't committed yet. Mist hung between the trees like ghosts resting before they rose. His stomach no longer screamed. His legs still ached, but the pain had settled into something familiar. Background noise. He climbed down from the shelter carefully, every movement deliberate. The jungle did not forgive sudden gestures. The river glimmered faint silver in the half-light. Arthur crouched, washed his face, and froze. Something was different. There were footprints in the mud, not from animals. Bootprints, deep, heavy, ordered. A patrol had passed here again. He wasn't just near them. He was on their path. He followed the prints a short distance. Slowly, silently. The jungle floor was soft from the night's moisture, each step a whisper. The prints cut through a patch of bamboo and under a canopy of giant leaves. Then he saw it, a thin dirt track, a human-made trail, not wide enough for vehicles, but wide enough for soldiers. A supply trail, most likely. He crouched behind a fallen log, observing. Footprints in both directions. Meaning, active route, used regularly. One wrong step here wasn't just dangerous, it was death. Half buried in the dirt beside the trail, he saw something metallic stick out. He brushed away the soil. A Japanese soldier's canteen, lightweight, aluminum, carved initials in kanji. He didn't recognize the characters. He lifted it. Water, sloshed inside. Clean water. He hesitated. This belonged to someone. Maybe someone alive. Maybe someone nearby. He raised it to his lips, took the smallest sip, just enough to taste. It was real. He drank, slow, careful. And when he lowered the canteen, he felt something, not relief, not comfort, but a weight, a reminder war wasn't gone. It was just temporarily out of sight. He heard footsteps. Fast. Light. Alone. Arthur ducked into the brush, body pressed into the earth. A Japanese soldier burst into view on the trail, young, maybe 18, barely a man. His uniform was stained with sweat. His breathing was quick, panicked. He kept glancing behind him, fear flashing in his expression. He wasn't on patrol. He was running. His hand clutched his side, blood seeping through his fingers. He was wounded. Badly. The soldier stumbled, collapsed onto one knee, tried to stand, failed. Arthur watched. His pulse pounded. This boy, this enemy, was going to die here. He did not have to lift a finger. He did not have to choose anything. All he had to do was stay still. The soldier fell onto his back. He stared up at the canopy. His breath shook, and then he began to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just soft, helpless tears. Tears of someone who realized he would die far from home, unseen, unknown, unheard. The same fate Arthur was fighting. And in that moment, the war disappeared. The uniforms meant nothing. The flags meant nothing. The languages meant nothing. They were just two boys, lost in a jungle that did not care about either of them. Arthur stepped out of the brush, slow, deliberate. The soldier's eyes widened, terrified. His hand grabbed at his rifle. Arthur raised both hands, palms open. It's okay. The soldier did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. Arthur knelt beside him, gently pried the soldier's hand from his wound. The bleeding was bad, but not hopeless. He tore cloth from his own sleeve, pressed it into the wound, wrapped it tight. The soldier watched him, breathing unsteady, fear softening to confusion. Then something else, something universal, not of language, not of identity, of humanity. Two men, not enemies, just men who wanted to live. Helping him meant danger. If a patrol returned and found Arthur, he'd be shot. If the soldier panicked and called out, Arthur would be caught. If word spread, Arthur would lose the only advantage he had: invisibility. He knew all of this, and still, he stayed. He lifted the soldier's head, let him drink from the canteen, the same one he found. For a moment, the world was silent. Not the jungle, not the war, just silence inside Arthur. A silence that felt like truth. The soldier whispered a single word. Arthur didn't understand it. He didn't need to, because the tone was gratitude. The boy raised a shaky hand, touched Arthur's chest, right where the photo of Tom was tucked under his uniform. A gesture that said, "You are alive. I am alive. We stay alive. Together." Arthur nodded once. Just once. The soldier closed his eyes. Not in death. In rest. Arthur stayed with him until his breathing grew steady, until the fear broke, until the jungle seemed to fade back into the trees. And in that moment, Arthur understood something he hadn't before. Survival was not just about the body. It was about the choice of who you become while trying to live. The jungle tested strength, but war tested the soul. The young Japanese soldier's name was Saburo. Arthur didn't learn that through conversation. He learned it from the stitching on the inside of the boy's uniform collar. Faded thread, hand-sewn, sentimental. Someone back home had stitched that. Someone who believed Saburo would return. Someone who believed he mattered. In that moment, Arthur knew Saburo wasn't just a soldier. He was somebody's son. Just like Arthur. Two men from opposite ends of the world, born under different flags, carrying histories that told them to hate each other. But the jungle didn't speak in flags. It spoke in hunger, in thirst, in pain, in survival. And now it spoke in need. Arthur tried English. "Can you walk?" Saburo blinked, confusion flickering. Saburo tried Japanese. Arthur understood nothing. So they spoke the only language humans all share. Gesture. Arthur tapped his own chest. "Arthur." Saburo hesitated, then tapped his. "Saburo." They didn't smile. But something softened. A truce. A fragile one. Saburo tried to stand. He nearly collapsed. Arthur caught him. Saburo leaned on him. Weight heavy, breath short. The wound wasn't fatal, but it was deep. Arthur tore another strip of cloth, tightened the bandage. They moved slowly along the riverbank, one step at a time. Two injured men, two strangers held together by necessity. The jungle watched, always watching. When dusk approached, they needed shelter again. Arthur led them to the tree shelter he had built. Crude, but off the ground. Saburo paused beneath it. He looked at Arthur with something like respect. Arthur pointed up. Saburo nodded. Halfway up, Saburo froze, pain twisting across his face. Arthur climbed down, helped him up the rest of the way. No words, just effort, just breath, just presence. They sat shoulder to shoulder, not close, but not guarded either. A quiet acceptance hung between them. Two exhausted men, two pounding heartbeats, one silence. Arthur handed Saburo a small strip of dried rabbit meat. Saburo stared at it, not angrily, not suspiciously, just surprised. Arthur nodded once. Saburo took it, chewed slowly, winced at the taste, raw and metallic. But he ate. Arthur ate his piece as well. Different histories, same hunger. Night came. Not softly. The jungle swallowed the light like it always did. But tonight, there was something new. Footsteps. Multiple. Marching rhythm. Torches flickering. Voices. Clear this time. Japanese patrol. More than before. Moving fast. Searching. Saburo stiffened. He knew what this meant. They were looking for him. A soldier missing was one thing. A soldier missing with his weapon gone. His canteen gone. His path unclear. That meant possibility. Possibility meant desertion. Desertion meant execution. Saburo's. Breath turned sharp and panicked. Arthur placed a hand on his shoulder to steady him. Saburo froze, shocked, then calmed. The footsteps grew louder. Leaves rustled. Branches snapped. Dogs barked, low and searching. Arthur and Saburo pressed their backs to the tree trunk, staying silent. If the patrol looked up, even by accident. It was over. Saburo closed his eyes tight. Arthur felt his pulse racing under his grip. The patrol passed below, torches glowing like fireflies moving. Through the dark, they didn't look up, not once. The jungle swallowed them. Again, slowly, the sound of boots faded into the night. Silence. Saburo opened his eyes. He didn't look at Arthur. He didn't need to. He understood. This man had just saved his life. Not once. Twice. Arthur didn't ask for loyalty, didn't demand thanks, didn't even speak. But Saburo bowed his head, a small bow. But a bow all the same. A bow meant for equals. When dawn broke, Saburo spoke a single word. Tomodachi. Arthur didn't know the language, but Saburo pressed his hand to Arthur's chest, over his heart, then to his own, then repeated, Tomodachi, friends. Not by choice, not by culture, not by nation, by survival. The jungle had done what war could not. It had shown two men that humanity mattered more than the uniforms they wore. The fight ahead would be harder now. Not two men trying to stay alive, but two men trying to stay alive together. And the world was about to test them for real, because the war was closing in, and the jungle was only the first enemy. The river became their roadmap. Not because it was easy to follow, nothing in the jungle was easy, but because water meant direction, and direction meant the possibility of somewhere. Arthur and Saburo walked slowly, leaning on each other, not as soldiers, as survivors. The jungle floor was uneven, roots curling like claws under the soil. Every vine looked like a snake in the corner of the eye, every shadow a threat. Saburo limped heavily, his wound healing but weak. Arthur's leg burned with each step, muscle tight and sore. But they moved, because moving forward meant life. Stopping meant being found, and being found, on either side of this war, meant death. They had meat for 2 days. On day 3, it ran out. Hunger returned, sharper, meaner, less patient. Their stomachs cramped, their steps slowed, their bodies shook. Saburo found a cluster of plants near the riverbank, broad leaves with thick roots. He pointed. Arthur hesitated. Saburo mimed peeling, slicing, rinsing in the water. A root like this could sustain you, if you knew what you were doing. Arthur nodded. Trust. They ate carefully, chewing slowly. The taste was bitter, earthy, not pleasant, but their bodies welcomed it. Hunger eased, just enough to keep walking. By nightfall, Arthur's fever came back, not as violently as before, but slow and deep, like embers glowing beneath skin. He shivered under the warm jungle air. Saburo gathered broad leaves, soaked them in cool river water, laid them across Arthur's forehead. Gentle, steady, human, the same care Arthur had shown him. They didn't need language for gratitude anymore. Some things speak for themselves. The next morning, the river widened. This was important. Small streams belong to the jungle. Big rivers belong to people. Where there is a wide river, there are often fishing camps, villages, rafts, trade paths, bridges. Human life. Arthur and Saburo stopped at the bank, looking at the widening water, breathing slow, silent breaths. They didn't smile, but hope settled in, quiet as the mist. They walked along the waterline. Then Saburo froze. He lifted a hand. Warning. Arthur stopped too. In the mud ahead, footprints. Human footprints. Fresh, but not boots, bare feet, a village, or a hunting camp. Saburo crouched to examine the prints. The spacing. The direction. The depth. He pointed downriver. Arthur nodded. They followed. Not fast. Not loud. Just steady. The jungle rustled overhead. Birds burst from branches. Something big moved far to their left, but the river guided them, calm and constant. Hours later, Saburo stopped again. He sniffed the air. Arthur inhaled too. Smoke. Not from fire bombs, not from burning jungle. Cooking fire. Human fire. Saburo pointed ahead, toward the bend in the river. Arthur's pulse quickened. Their world narrowed to one thought. People. They moved closer, crouching low. Through the vines they saw it. A clearing. 3 huts built from bamboo and broad leaves. Smoke rising from a clay fire pit. Fishing nets drying on wooden poles. And a man, thin, weathered, repairing a net. Not Japanese. Not American. Not military, a local. Tribesman. Arthur felt relief rise like a wave. But Saburo's hand shot out, gripping his wrist. His eyes were sharp, wary, cautious, not. All tribes welcomed outsiders. Some helped the Japanese. Some helped the Americans. Some helped no one. The wrong approach could end with a spear through the chest. Arthur nodded. They waited, watching, listening, breathing. The old fisherman worked patiently, humming softly, a low, melodic tune that blended into the jungle like it belonged there. Arthur whispered, softly, slowly, "We try." Saburo took a breath, then nodded once. They stepped from the trees. Slow, visible, hands open, no weapons drawn. The fisherman looked up. His eyes widened, not in fear, but recognition of something impossible. 2 soldiers, from opposite sides, standing together. For a moment the world held its breath. The fisherman said something, a string of words neither of them understood. Arthur shook his head slowly. No war. No fight, he said softly. Saburo echoed the gesture. Open hands, lowered shoulders. The fisherman stared a moment longer. Then he motioned them forward. Not as enemies, not as intruders, as men who needed help. Arthur felt something he hadn't felt since the cockpit. Before the crash. Not relief, not safety, but the first spark of being found. Before they could step closer, a shout, then another, branches snapping, boots running. The jungle wasn't done with them, not yet. The gunfire came first, short, controlled bursts echoing through the trees. Arthur froze mid-step, every muscle in his body locking tight. Saburo's head snapped toward the sound. Then, silence. Not the soft silence of peace, but the loaded kind that waits for something to happen. They dropped low, backs pressed to the wet roots of a tree. The air smelled of smoke again, not from a cooking fire this time, but from gunpowder. The war had found them again. Arthur's pulse hammered against his ribs. He could almost hear his own blood. Saburo whispered something. Quick, urgent Japanese, the tone clear. Move. They crawled through the undergrowth, each movement slow, careful, measured. The leaves brushed their faces like nervous fingers. Somewhere ahead, men shouted orders. Japanese voices, tense, searching, a patrol. Bigger than before. Maybe chasing deserters. Maybe sweeping the area after hearing rumors of an American crash. Either way, they were closing in. Arthur caught Saburo's eyes. They didn't need words anymore. Both knew what had to happen. Run. But not together. Two men running would draw eyes. One might slip through. Arthur shook his head. Saburo did too. They argued in silence. Gestures, looks, breath. Finally, Arthur reached forward and gripped Saburo's shoulder. Firm, steady. Then he mouthed the words, slowly, knowing Saburo wouldn't understand them, but would feel their meaning. Go. Live. Saburo's eyes widened, not in fear, but in protest. He pointed to himself, then to Arthur. Together. Arthur gave a small, almost broken smile. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph. The one of him and Tom under the wing of their plane. He tore it in half. He handed one piece to Saburo. The other he kept, a bond split, but not severed. Proof that both halves still existed somewhere. Saburo hesitated, then took it. His hand trembled as he folded the torn edge into his pocket. Arthur whispered again, quieter this time. Go. And Saburo went. He melted into the green like smoke dissolving into air. Gone. Arthur waited until the voices drew closer. Boots crunching on wet leaves. Rifles clattering softly, radios hissing static in the distance. Then he moved the other way. Crawling low, body aching, breath sharp. The jungle twisted around him, roots snaring at his boots, vines catching his shoulders, branches whipping his face. Every sound he made felt like thunder. He didn't look back. He didn't dare. By the time the river came into view again, his lungs were burning. The wide current shimmered in sunlight, too bright, too open, too visible. But there was no choice left. He crouched by the bank, catching his breath. In the distance, faint smoke still rose where the fisherman's hut had been, either burned or abandoned. The voices behind him had faded, but war has a way of echoing long after it's gone. He followed the river downstream, half limping, half dragging his injured leg, until the ground began to slope downward. The trees thinned. The air changed, less heavy, more open. And then, he heard it. Not gunfire, not thunder, a low mechanical hum. Engines. Arthur's head shot up. He ran, stumbled, fell, got up again. Branches ripped his sleeves, mud clung to his boots, but he didn't stop. He burst from the tree line and froze. Below, stretched across a wide bend of river, was a makeshift airstrip, rough, cut into the earth, lined with supply tents and oil drums, and painted across the wings of a single twin-engine plane parked near the center. A white star inside a blue circle. American. Arthur's throat closed. For a second, his knees almost gave out. He blinked hard. Once, twice, to make sure it wasn't a fever dream. It was real. He stumbled forward, waving both arms, shouting, a raw, cracking sound that barely resembled his own voice. "Hey! Hey!" The mechanics near the plane froze. One pointed, another dropped a wrench. Then a soldier sprinted toward him, rifle half raised, shouting orders Arthur couldn't hear. Arthur raised both hands, palms open, trembling. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. Finally, one broke free. "Hale! Lieutenant Arthur Hale, U.S. Army Air Forces." The soldier hesitated, then shouted back over his shoulder. More men ran toward him. Someone yelled for a medic. Someone else caught Arthur under the arms as his legs gave out completely. The last thing he saw before his vision blurred was the American flag painted on a supply crate. Faded, dirt-streaked, beautiful. Then everything went white. When he woke, the air was cooler. Canvas above him, bandages on his leg, an IV dripping beside him. A voice nearby said softly, "You're lucky, Lieutenant. We thought you were gone months ago." Arthur blinked at the light. His lips moved before his mind caught up. "Saburo." The medic frowned. "Who?" Arthur didn't answer. He just reached into his pocket. The torn half of the photograph was still there. Crumpled, soaked, faded. He turned it over, thumb brushing the edge. Half a memory, half a promise. He smiled faintly. Weak, but real. Somewhere out there, on the other side of that jungle, maybe Saburo was doing the same. Weeks later, as the transport plane lifted him from the island, Arthur looked down through the small round window. The jungle stretched below, green, endless, shimmering. A graveyard of men and machines. A world older than war, he whispered quietly. Not to anyone, but to the vast living sea of trees below. "You didn't take me. And maybe, just maybe." The jungle whispered back through the rustle of leaves. "You learned." The engines roared. The island fell away beneath the clouds. For the first time in what felt like centuries, Arthur Hale smiled without fear. He was going home, but part of him would always stay there, in the heart of the jungle, beside a friend who was once an enemy, and in the silence between life and death, where the will to live burns brighter than any war.